You ever sit across from someone who's smiling at you, nodding at the right moments, saying all the right things, and yet something in your gut whispers, "This isn't real"? I've been there. Too many times, actually. At first, I thought I was just being paranoid or too sensitive. But the feeling didn't go away. It lingered, grew louder. It was like standing in a sunlit room that still feels cold. It took me a long time to realize that not every smile is born from kindness. Some are shields, some are weapons, some are masks for something much darker. And once I started trusting that quiet discomfort inside me, the part of me that always knew, I began to see what I hadn't wanted to admit. Some people around me didn't like me at all. They just got really good at pretending. You'd be surprised how many folks walk around wearing friendliness like a costume. It's subtle. It's not what they say, it's how they say it. The tone, the timing, the slight edge in their joke that hits too close to home. The compliments that leave you feeling a little smaller instead of seen. You try to laugh it off because everyone else is laughing and you don't want to seem like you're overreacting. But deep down you feel that sting, not just from the words, but from the betrayal of the moment. That's when you realize the real hurt isn't in what was said. It's in the fact that someone chose to wound you while smiling. One of my closest friends growing up, I'll call him Chris, was a master of this. We were tight, did everything together, but the older we got, the more I noticed his humor had teeth. He'd joke about how I always get emotional or how I overthink everything. People laughed, I laughed too, but later, when I was alone, those words echoed in my head, made me question myself, made me feel broken. I remember once, after I opened up to him about a rough patch I was going through, he said, "Man, you always make life more dramatic than it needs to be." I laughed like I always did, but I didn't sleep that night. That one sentence kept me awake, not because it was harsh, but because it came from someone I trusted, someone who, instead of holding my vulnerability, stepped on it. You see, it's easy to spot open cruelty. What's hard is spotting the kind that wears politeness like armor. And when you've been trained by family, by society, by your own fear, not to trust your instincts, you gaslight yourself into silence. You tell yourself, they didn't mean it. I'm just being sensitive. But the truth? That little voice inside you isn't a liar. It's the most honest part of you. It's your body's way of protecting your soul. Carl Jung talked about the shadow, the hidden parts of ourselves we refuse to face. And I think that's where this kind of behavior is born. People project what they hate about themselves onto others. If someone hasn't dealt with their own anger, they'll mock your passion. If they're ashamed of their vulnerability, they'll shame yours. And they won't even realize they're doing it, but you will. You'll feel it in the subtle erosion of your confidence, the way you begin to shrink around them, edit yourself, brace for the next sting disguised as a joke. That's the thing about covert hostility. It doesn't cut with a knife. It carves you slowly with words that don't leave bruises. And when you finally start to recognize it, it changes you. You begin to walk through the world differently. You stop assuming that everyone who smiles at you means well. You start listening more closely, not to their words, but to how you feel when you're around them. And that's not cynicism, that's survival, that's wisdom earned through pain. I had to learn that I wasn't crazy for feeling uneasy. I wasn't wrong for wanting warmth without the burn. I started asking myself, do I feel safe in this conversation? Do I feel uplifted, or do I feel picked apart? That shift, those questions, they were the beginning of reclaiming my emotional clarity. I still remember the day I stopped laughing at Chris's jokes. He said something snide about a project I'd been working hard on, some offhand comment about how it wasn't that deep. Everyone chuckled. I didn't. I looked him in the eye and said, "You know, if you don't care, you don't have to say anything at all." His face froze. The moment cracked something open, not just in him, but in me. I had finally stood up for that quiet, shivering part of myself that had spent years pretending to be okay. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about drama. It was about truth. The truth that I deserved real friends, not ones who camouflaged their resentment behind sarcasm. I deserved kindness that didn't need translation, and so do you. So if there's someone in your life who leaves you second-guessing yourself, who jokes in ways that hurt, who smiles while you shrink, trust the chill in your bones. That's not overthinking. That's your truth knocking. Open the door. It's strange how some betrayals don't scream, they whisper. They don't announce themselves with grand gestures or obvious lies. Instead, they slip in quietly, through missed messages, forgotten invitations, or well-timed mistakes that only seem to happen when something important is at stake. At first, you excuse them. Everyone forgets things, right? But when the pattern repeats, when it always seems to happen just when you needed support the most, that's when your gut starts talking again. I had a colleague once, Ava, smart, capable, always smiling. We got along great, or so I thought. We'd work on projects together, have lunch now and then, talk about life and dreams. But something always felt off, like I was one step behind and didn't know why. There was this time I was up for a major opportunity. I'd been preparing for weeks. The whole team knew. One day, Ava offered to help me finalize some of the details. Review the deck, check the numbers, all of it. I was grateful. I thought, wow, this is someone who really wants to see me win. But the next morning, when I submitted the project, I realized one critical file had the wrong version. It was small, but it altered the final presentation in a way that made me look careless. It cost me the opportunity. When I asked her about it, she shrugged. Oh no, I must have opened the wrong folder. I was sure that was the right one. So sorry. And just like that, the damage was done, but dressed in innocence. I told myself it was a mistake. But a few weeks later, something similar happened. Then again, and again, always around important moments. Always framed as forgetfulness or oops or I didn't realize. It hit me hard when I finally admitted what I didn't want to believe. Some people don't sabotage you loudly. They do it softly, with plausible deniability, because then, when you confront them, you look like the paranoid one. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And I think that's exactly what this kind of behavior is. Unconscious envy, quiet bitterness, fear of being left behind, all bubbling underneath the surface, guiding their actions without their awareness. But your soul feels it. The real heartbreak isn't in the sabotage. It's in realizing that someone you trusted was never truly rooting for you, that they saw your growth not as inspiration, but as a threat. And instead of working on their own path, they focused on tripping yours. You start replaying everything. Was the smile real? Was the praise genuine? How long had they felt this way? And worst of all, you begin to question yourself. Am I being too sensitive? Too suspicious? But then the deeper truth comes in like a quiet wave. No one accidentally hurts you that many times. Here's what I've learned the hard way. Some people will cheer you on right up until the moment you outgrow the version of you they felt comfortable with. When your light gets brighter, it exposes the shadows they've been avoiding, and instead of facing their own discomfort, they'll try to dim you. But the more you trust yourself, the less permission you give for that to happen. I started paying attention, not just to words, but to energy. Who shows up when it matters? Who remembers the things that are important to you? Who forgets, but only when it costs you something? These are questions that don't lie, and you don't need proof to create distance. You don't need an apology to walk away. You don't need a smoking gun to say, I deserve better than this, because you do. I began removing myself quietly, no drama, no confrontation. I stopped sharing important things. I let the connection fade, and in that silence, something beautiful happened. I felt lighter, more focused. My peace returned. Ava moved on. So did I, and I never confronted her, not because I was afraid, but because I didn't need to prove anything. The truth had already revealed itself, and I chose to protect my energy instead of chasing explanations. That's what self-respect looks like, choosing yourself even when it's lonely, even when it hurts. You're allowed to stop making space for people who secretly want to see you stumble. You're allowed to stop giving the benefit of the doubt to those who've shown you more than once that their loyalty has limits. Because real friends don't forget you when it matters. Real allies don't sabotage you softly. And people who love you don't need reminders to treat your dreams with care. So if you felt this, if someone keeps accidentally hurting you when you're trying to rise, know this: you're not crazy, you're not making it up, you're seeing clearly, and that clarity is your invitation to step into freedom. There's a different kind of ache that shows up when you realize someone isn't just trying to sabotage you, they're trying to outshine you, not openly, not in a loud, competitive kind of way. No, it's quieter than that. It's that weird shift in energy when you share something you're proud of, and instead of celebration, the other person pivots the spotlight onto themselves. You walk away from the conversation not uplifted but smaller, like your moment was swallowed up before it ever had a chance to breathe. It's easy to miss at first. You share some good news. Maybe you got promoted or published something or just had a breakthrough in your healing journey, and the person across from you nods, smiles thinly, and says, "That's great. You know, I actually did something similar a few months ago." And just like that, your moment is gone. It's not that they didn't acknowledge it, it's that they redirected it. This happened to me a lot with someone I considered a close friend. We'll call him Derek. Every time something good happened in my life, Derek had a better story, a bigger win, a more impressive version of whatever I had just shared. If I said I was starting therapy, he'd talk about how he'd already done that and moved on to something deeper. If I published a piece of writing, he'd send me links to his old blog, casually reminding me that he'd been doing that for years. At first, I admired it. I thought he was just confident, that maybe I was being insecure, but over time I started to dread sharing my growth with him, not because he criticized me, but because he always had to top me. It didn't matter what it was, he just couldn't let my moment stand on its own. And here's the thing, it's not always about malice. Sometimes it's about fear. Fear of being left behind. Fear of feeling invisible. And rather than dealing with that fear, some people try to stay one step ahead of you, not to inspire, but to dominate. Carl Jung talked about how the shadow isn't just our darkness, it's our disowned potential. When people can't access their own light, they resent those who do. They see your progress not as a reflection of what's possible, but as proof of what they haven't achieved. And instead of turning inward, they project that discomfort outward. They minimize, compete, redirect, quietly, constantly. This kind of competition is toxic because it doesn't look like conflict. It wears the mask of casual conversation, but it leaves you feeling deflated, dismissed. And the more it happens, the more you begin to hide parts of yourself. Not to protect your ego, but to protect your joy. I remember the turning point for me. I had finished something deeply personal, a writing project that took months of inner work. When I shared it with Derek, he glanced at it and said, "Nice? Reminds me of that piece I wrote last year, same kind of vibe." And that was it. No real engagement, no curiosity, just a soft push that nudged my heart back into its shell. It hurt, not because I needed praise, but because I wanted to be seen. I wanted someone to meet me where I was, not drag the moment back to themselves. After that, I stopped sharing as much. And in that space of silence, I started asking myself why I was still holding on to this friendship. The truth was hard. I had mistaken proximity for support. We spent time together, yes, we had history, but history isn't the same as safety. That realization cracked something open. I began to pay attention to how I felt after our conversations. Was I energized or drained, inspired or invisible? Did I feel like I had been met or managed? You know what I found? I felt small, like I had to shrink to fit the version of me that didn't threaten him. And once I saw that, I couldn't unsee it. It's easy to think, well, everyone competes a little. That's just human nature. But competition disguised as friendship corrodes your spirit, especially when your wins are met with silence, indifference, or one-upmanship. Real friends don't need to be better than you. They just want you to be your best. They celebrate with you because your joy doesn't threaten their worth. So I started pulling away, not in anger, but in truth. I didn't need to make a speech or call him out. I just stopped watering something that wasn't growing. And in that stillness, I created room for people who celebrated me without needing to insert themselves into the story. If you felt this, if someone consistently turns your joy into their stage, let that be a signal. You're not asking for too much. You're asking for alignment, for connection that doesn't come with a price tag, for love that isn't conditional on you staying small. You deserve to shine without apology, to grow without guilt, to share your joy without it being measured or mirrored. And the right people, they'll clap for you, not compete with you. Sometimes the most painful thing isn't someone's hatred, it's their pretend love, that hollow kindness. The "I care about you" that doesn't feel warm in your chest. It's like they're reading a script and you're supposed to believe it's real. But something's missing, something essential. I think we all have people like that in our lives at some point. The ones who say all the right things but show up empty when it matters. I had someone like that. Her name was Melissa. On the surface, she was kind, always asking how I was doing, offering advice, checking in. But over time, I started to notice a pattern. Every time I needed her, really needed her, she disappeared. Once, when I was going through something dark, I reached out. It took a lot to even send the message. I just said, "I'm having a rough time. I could really use someone to talk to." Her reply, "Oh, that sucks. Hope it gets better soon. I'm swamped with work right now, but sending hugs." And I just sat there staring at my phone, wondering if I had asked for too much, wondering if maybe my pain was too heavy to carry, even for a friend. But what hurt most wasn't the rejection. It was the pretense, the act of care without the heart behind it, the smile without the warmth, the concern without the presence. That's when I began to understand something Jung once hinted at, that emotional distance is often a symptom of unresolved wounds. Some people can't offer genuine support because to do so, they'd have to feel. They'd have to empathize. And for them, that's dangerous territory, because it might awaken parts of themselves they've worked hard to bury. You see, real connection requires vulnerability, and vulnerability is a threat to people who live behind armor. So instead, they offer surface-level concern. It looks nice, it sounds nice, but it doesn't land. It doesn't hold you. I started noticing this pattern in other ways too. Whenever something good happened, Melissa would say all the right words. "So proud of you," or "You're amazing." But her voice was flat. Her eyes didn't light up. There was no real joy in her presence, just a vague discomfort she tried to cover up with compliments. It was like she couldn't feel it with me, and I don't blame her entirely. I think deep down she struggled with her own pain. Maybe she hadn't dealt with her disappointments, so seeing someone else rise reminded her of everything she hadn't become. Maybe she wanted to celebrate me, but couldn't bear to feel like she was falling behind. But no matter the reason, the effect was the same. I felt alone in her company, unsupported in her presence. I used to twist myself into knots trying to make those friendships work. I thought if I just explained better, or shared less, or made myself easier to love, it would get better. But it didn't, because the issue wasn't me needing too much. It was them not having enough to give. One day, I finally asked myself a hard question. Why do I keep clinging to people who only show up halfway? And the answer hit me harder than I expected. It was because I thought halfway was the best I could get, because I confused politeness with love, familiarity with loyalty, and emotional neutrality with stability. But love isn't neutral. Real care feels. It shows up. It sits with you in the dark and says, I don't know how to fix it, but I'm here. And when you succeed, it radiates. It claps the loudest. It doesn't shrink in your light. It shines with you. Melissa and I drifted, not through a fight, not through drama, just through truth, through me no longer pretending her half-presence was enough, through me deciding that warmth matters more than words, that presence means more than performance. And here's the gift in that pain. When you stop accepting pretend love, you make space for the real thing. Now, I have people in my life who make me feel safe when I speak, who don't flinch when I cry, who celebrate me without jealousy, and I would have never found them if I had kept pouring into people who were already full of their own silence. So if you're reading this, and you've been feeling that ache, that almost care, that not quite presence, let me tell you something. You're not crazy. You're not needy. You're just waking up to your worth. You're realizing that love shouldn't leave you cold, and maybe it's time to stop explaining your pain to people who only hear noise. Maybe it's time to stop inviting half-hearted hearts to witness your full self. You deserve friends who feel with you, who show up with more than emojis and hollow phrases, who stand in your corner even when it's not convenient, and who never, ever make you question whether your joy is too big or your sadness too much. When you find them, you'll know, because being with them will feel like coming home. It took me a while to realize that control doesn't always look like someone yelling at you or forcing you into things you clearly don't want. Sometimes it comes with a smile, with concern, with words that sound like care but leave you feeling smaller, more uncertain, dependent. The trickiest people I've ever dealt with weren't the ones who openly tried to dominate me. It was the ones who disguised their need to control as help. The ones who said things like, I just want what's best for you, while slowly dismantling my confidence. Who offered constant advice, but never space. Who made me question my own instincts while assuring me it was just out of love. There was someone like that in my life. I'll call her Nora. Nora always had opinions. She'd say things like, I'm only telling you this because I care, or you need someone to be honest with you. And at first, I appreciated that. It felt good to have someone so involved, so invested. But over time, that investment started to feel like intrusion. Every decision I made came under her microscope. If I tried something new, she'd question it. If I felt excited, she'd warn me not to get my hopes up. If I made a mistake, it was, see, I told you. And slowly, I stopped trusting myself. I started second-guessing every step. I'd wait to get her opinion before moving forward, just to be safe, just to avoid that passive-aggressive sigh or that concerned frown. Looking back, I see it clearly now. That wasn't support. That was control. Jung once said that people try to control others when they can't control their own inner chaos, and I think that's exactly what was happening. Nora was terrified of unpredictability, of emotional messiness, so she managed it the only way she knew how, by managing me. It wasn't malicious, but it was harmful, Because here's the truth, when someone chips away at your confidence under the pretense of helping you, it's not love. When they make you doubt your ability to choose, to navigate, to learn, they aren't protecting you. They're trying to contain you, to keep you within the limits that they feel safe with. And the most dangerous part? You start internalizing it. You start thinking, maybe I do need them to tell me what to do. Maybe I'm not that good at making decisions. That's when you start shrinking, not because someone told you to, but because you've been conditioned to believe it's safer that way. I remember one moment that snapped me out of it. I had just turned down a job that didn't feel right, and I felt proud of myself for listening to my gut. When I told Nora, her face dropped. "That's a big risk," she said. "You sure you're not being impulsive again?" Again, that word hit hard. She'd used it before, always with that tone, and suddenly I realized she didn't trust me. Not really. She trusted her judgment more than mine, and somewhere along the way I'd started doing the same. So I stepped back, gently but firmly. I stopped asking for her advice. I stopped sharing every decision. I started rebuilding that connection with myself, the one I had given away so easily. And it wasn't easy. When you've been under someone's emotional control, even if it's soft and subtle, breaking free feels scary. You feel guilty, disloyal, ungrateful, because they weren't cruel, they weren't screaming, they were just looking out for you. But love doesn't sound like doubt. It doesn't feel like pressure. It doesn't make you smaller to feel safe. Love says, "I believe in you," even when you mess up, even when you're uncertain. Love walks beside you, not ahead of you with a flashlight, demanding you follow. So if you've got someone in your life who always seems to know better, who makes you question your voice, your timing, your heart, pause. Ask yourself, do I feel freer after talking to them or more confined? Because true care doesn't ask you to hand over your compass. It cheers you on as you find your own way. The most important relationship you'll ever have is with yourself. Don't let anyone else become the gatekeeper of your intuition. You were born with wisdom. You were born with the ability to learn and grow through your own experience. You don't need to be micromanaged. You need to be trusted. And if someone in your life can't offer that, if their help keeps you small, it's okay to step back. Not with anger, but with clarity. Because sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop letting someone else narrate your story. I don't think anything quite prepares you for the moment you find out someone's been talking behind your back, especially someone you trusted, someone you thought was in your corner. It's not just about the words they said. It's about the choice they made to speak in shadows instead of light, to let their doubts and criticisms roam free in rooms you weren't invited into. And when you hear about it through a whisper, a look, or someone else's awkward silence, you start to question everything. I remember the first time this happened with someone I considered family, a person who'd seen me at my most raw and vulnerable. We had spent hours talking about our dreams, our pain, the stuff most people never see. And then one day, I heard from someone else that they'd been mocking me, questioning my path, downplaying my success, twisting my words to fit their narrative. It felt like someone kicked the ground out from under me. You think, why didn't they come to me? Why smile to my face if you don't mean it? What did I do to deserve that? But as painful as it is, I've learned that gossip is almost never about you. It's a mirror, reflecting the speaker's own fears, insecurities, and self-loathing. Carl Jung said something that stuck with me. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. And I believe the reverse is also true. When people speak bitterly about others, they're often revealing more about themselves than the person they're criticizing. When someone gossips about your courage, it's usually because they feel stuck. When they mock your vulnerability, it's because they're afraid of their own. When they belittle your success, it's because they haven't made peace with their failures. But understanding this doesn't make the betrayal hurt any less. What hurt the most for me wasn't even what was said. It was that they chose others over truth, that they used their voice to wound instead of to connect, that they had access to my heart and decided to use it as a weapon in rooms I couldn't enter. And the worst part? You start to wonder who else is sitting at those tables nodding. You start to mistrust your own memories. Were they ever really my friend? Were the hugs real? Was the laughter real? That's what betrayal does. It doesn't just break trust with the person who hurt you. It fractures your sense of reality, your sense of self. But here's what I've learned, and it took me time to get there. You don't have to defend yourself. You don't have to chase rumors or try to set the record straight. Because the people who matter, the ones who know your heart, already know. And the ones who believe the gossip, they were never truly with you to begin with. I started practicing silence, not out of fear, but out of power. I stopped explaining myself to people who had already made up their minds. I stopped wasting energy on conversations designed to distort, not understand. I let my life, my actions, and my peace speak for me. And in that silence, I began to notice something else. Who wasn't talking? Who stayed? Who checked in? Who offered a safe place to land when the world felt cold? Those people became my true north. They reminded me that not everyone thrives on shadows. Some people live in truth, in warmth, in loyalty. I also began setting quiet boundaries. I stopped sharing deeply with people who didn't know how to hold tenderness. I stopped opening my soul to those who only wanted to dissect it. And that wasn't bitterness, it was wisdom, because love without respect is just performance. And friendship without safety is a slow erosion of the spirit. If you're navigating this right now, if you've been hurt by the words of someone you trusted, please hear this. You are not what they say about you in secret. You are not defined by the rooms you're excluded from or the stories twisted in your absence. You are who you are when no one's watching. You are your courage, your softness, your honesty. And you don't need to shrink, hide, or prove anything just to win back people who chose to speak from their pain instead of their truth. Let them go. Let them have their stories. You keep writing yours, with integrity, with depth, with the kind of love that doesn't need an audience. Because the right people, they don't need to be convinced. They feel you, they see you, and they stand beside you, even when the rumors start. There's something eerie about realizing that someone resents your happiness, that your light makes someone else wince. And not because you've done anything wrong, but because you've done something right. You've healed, you've grown, you've dared to want more, and instead of celebration, what you get is silence, withdrawal, or worse, fake smiles paired with distant eyes. You know the feeling. You share good news with someone, and their response is off. They pause too long. Their voice is too flat. Their eyes don't meet yours. They say, "That's great," but you can feel the energy in the room shift. It doesn't expand. It contracts. You start to wonder, did I say too much? Should I have kept it to myself? But the truth is, you shouldn't have to dim your joy to make someone else comfortable. I've been on the receiving end of that reaction more times than I'd like to admit. Moments where I was proud of something, excited to share, and I watched someone I loved slip into discomfort. Not because they didn't care, but because my growth reminded them of everything they hadn't yet become. My joy mirrored their sorrow, and instead of holding space, they pulled away. There was a moment years ago when I was finally starting to come out of a long stretch of depression. I was writing again, smiling more, reconnecting with life. I remember telling someone close to me, "I feel like I'm finally coming back to myself." And they just nodded and said, "Must be nice." 3 words, That's all it took to make me question my right to be happy. But here's what I've learned since then. People who love you will never resent your healing. They won't flinch when you rise. They won't compete with your light or downplay your wins. They'll be the first to clap, even when they're struggling, because love isn't about perfect timing, it's about presence. And presence says, I see you, I'm with you, your joy doesn't threaten me. Carl Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But becoming yourself, fully, loudly, unapologetically, will always disturb those who haven't given themselves that same permission. And their discomfort isn't your burden to carry. I used to bend. I'd soften my words, shrink my dreams, add disclaimers like, I know it's not a big deal, but just to avoid making someone else uncomfortable. But eventually, I realized I was protecting their insecurity at the cost of my own wholeness. And that's not love, that's self-abandonment. So I stopped apologizing for my joy. I stopped shrinking in the presence of silence. I started letting myself feel the full warmth of my own growth, even if no one else clapped. Because I knew what it cost to get here. I knew the nights I cried, the risks I took, the courage it took to keep going. And that deserves more than lukewarm praise. If someone distances themselves when you rise, let them. If they turn cold when you shine, believe them. Their reaction is not your responsibility. Your joy is not an inconvenience. It's a testament to your survival, your strength, your choice to keep becoming, to keep healing. And if someone can't sit with your light, they were never meant to walk beside you through the dark. You deserve to be seen in full color. No dimmers, no edits, no apologies. So celebrate yourself. Fully, loudly, even alone. Because in the end, the most beautiful thing you can do is refuse to shrink for people who are afraid to grow.